The Senate candidate Roy Moore was back on the campaign trail last night in his first public appearance in almost 2 weeks. Moore and his team have blasted the media for asking about the allegations against him, not the issues. But when he got the mic, the issues were far from Moore's focus.
These allegations are completely false. They're malicious. Specifically, I do not know any of these women. It's no different than when the Washington Post brought out the Russian investigation at a time when President Trump is trying to get his agenda passed. I'm going to take off some gloves and show the truth in this campaign.
The Russia investigation is a federal investigation. The Washington Post didn't just bring it out during Trump's agenda talks. All right, anyway, with that, there are just 2 weeks ago until the special election in Alabama. Moore and his opponent, Doug Jones, are making the final push to try and win over voters. But now there is another candidate in the race. Lee Busby has launched a write-in campaign. The retired Marine colonel who once worked for White House Chief of Staff John Kelly says he was unhappy with the current candidates, and he believes that he has a chance to win. Colonel Lee Busby joins me now. Colonel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I was watching you this morning on Morning Joe with my colleagues, and you said something that struck me. You said you couldn't care less about the allegations that Roy Moore sexually abused a 14-year-old. Is that true? You really couldn't care less about allegations of child molesting?
I don't mean at a personal level, either for me or the people involved. I meant in terms of what my campaign is about. It is, among other things, giving the Alabama voters an alternative to having to deal with that mess.
What is the alternative that you're going to be offering them?
To vote for me.
Well, we were looking on your website and trying to get some of your positions sorted out. So we want to know where you stand on certain things. The tax reform bill that's currently being debated in Congress. Would you support it? And if you do, what do you like better, the House or Senate version?
Well, I don't think the Senate version is complete unless it happened today. I would support the Republican platform for the tax reform.
Well, what specifically about the Senate version do you not like?
Is it complete?
Well, there's an outline of it. They're debating it right now. I mean, they are going to get rid of the personal mandate. Are you for getting rid of the personal mandate? The individual mandate, I'm sorry, for Obamacare?
Yes, I'm in favor of getting rid of Obamacare.
So are you saying that you would vote in line with President Trump, regardless of what's in the bills?
I would vote in line with the Republican platform, the Republican position.
So wherever the Republicans are going, you would go with them?
Yes.
Retired Marine Colonel and now Alabama Senate race write-in candidate Lee Busby. Colonel, thank you so much for joining us. Sorry it was short. We got smashed today with all of the breaking news. Okay, I understand. Thank you for having me. Thanks for coming on. NBC News national political correspondent Steve Kornacki joins me now. Steve, does Colonel Busby have a chance in this race?
It is hard to see how he'd be a factor in terms of winning it, but look, it wouldn't take much when you look at where the polls are in this race right now. You basically got a dead-even race when you average the polls together. If it's that way on Election Day and he's pulling even 0.5%, 1%, and it's coming basically from Roy Moore's hide, sure, if it's that close, then, you know, any vote can make a difference. But I think really the indications I'm getting right now in terms of would he have any money behind him, would he have any major sort of establishment support behind him, is he going to have much of a media presence here, it makes me think he's not going to be much of a factor in terms of the raw votes. It just becomes an issue. Is this a close enough race that it's like Florida with those hanging chads in 2000 where everything can matter. But I think if he does matter, it's likely to be in that way. Hold that thought, because this is a crazy day. Sen.Graham is now speaking with reporters. Let's listen in. Plus a high-risk pool, which would help level out insurance premiums. So I thought that was progress.
You see the frustration here. You've seen the projections. What do you say to middle-class Americans who are afraid their taxes are going to go up?
That everything these people are telling you, I believe to be wrong. It won't be what I say. It will be how it affects them. If this bill works the way I think, all these loud people will have proven to be loud, and I will have proven to be right. If it doesn't do what I think it will do, then we will lose.
So we're going to rise and fall on how this affects the American people. Does it create the jobs we think it will do? Will it put money in the pockets of working people like we think? And if we're successful, we're going to do very well, and they will be considered loud people. If we fail, we're going to get beat, and that's the way it should be.
Senator, this North Korean missile launch, are we out of options on North Korea at this point?
Not yet, but we're getting closer.
Look, I don't want to be rude to
Sen.Graham trying to make his way through that scrum of reporters. Meanwhile, on the other side of Capitol Hill, Senator Chuck Schumer is speaking to reporters. Let's listen to Chuck.
And decides he wants to be a constructive force, working with both sides to forge a bipartisan deal, we're happy to meet with him anytime, anywhere, any place. But as long as he remains a destructive force, it would be a waste of everyone's time to continue working with someone who clearly has no interest in coming to an agreement. We hope the President, in order to avoid this calamity, will change his mind. The President and our Republican friends run the House and Senate. They have a responsibility not to let the government run out of funds. We're willing to work with them, but they have to do it in a bipartisan way. Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Chuck. The tweet that the President released this morning concerned me in one particular respect. There is only one immigration bill that is pending before this Congress that is being taken seriously. Senator Cornyn.
Okay, so Chuck Schumer and the Democrats are pushing back on the assertion that they should be going to the White House meeting with the President, saying that the President already tweeted this morning that there's no deal to be had, so there's no point in going to just sit there and have the President tell them that there's no deal. This is all coming on the heels of, or not the heels, it's also happening at the same time as news out of North Korea. We're just learning from the White House press pool that the President is expected to give remarks at 3 p.m. That's in about 15 minutes. Unclear what he's going to give remarks on, but I presume it'll probably be taxes, the government shutdown or the government funding, and probably North Korea. We're going to be watching out for that. Joining us here to I guess continue this conversation on taxes is Steve Kornacki, who was with me a moment ago. Sorry for interrupting you, Steve. And also Jeremy Peters with the New York Times. Steve, let's go back to you. Well, let's pivot. We were talking about Doug Jones and Roy Moore. Let's now talk about taxes. The Republicans need to get this done. And they've all but admitted that they need to get this done, even though it's unpopular, because if they don't, their donors are going to revolt. I mean, that's pretty surprising to admit that it's not so much about the voters, it's about the donors.
It's interesting. I mean, look, you could make an argument to the extent they got to worry about the donors. It's connected to the election because they need money to run these campaigns next year. I think there's two things that Republicans on Capitol Hill, Republicans in Congress are thinking about. One is having the money to run these campaigns next year, being able to get these big checks. Also, it's about being able to say, we did something. You handed us, the voters, the House, the Senate, the presidency, that dream combination, the trifecta. And yeah, actually, here's this big thing that we did with the power you gave us. So I think that psychologically they want to be able to say that. But the thing that's striking to me about the political dynamic right now is when you think of that combination that Republicans have and how they got it, Donald Trump winning Democratic states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Donald Trump winning big in states that have Democratic senators, Montana, North Dakota, Indiana, places like this. There doesn't seem to be any political pressure right now being exerted on the Democratic senators, on Democratic members of Congress from places that Donald Trump won. This is all about
what's going on?
Joe, and it looks like Joe Manchin's now, he seems a state that went 40 points. West Virginia did 40. This is basically the most pro-Trump state in the country. No pressure, really, on Joe Manchin to be on board with this.
Are they is this just a lack of political savvy? What's going on here?
Yeah, you can't, it's hard to look at what the Republicans are putting together and see. You would look at these Democrats and say there would be opportunities here potentially to separate these. There have been, all year this has been the case, I think. There have been theoretical opportunities to pit these Democrats between their base and their voters. And just there's nothing in this bill. This is a bill that is all about, it really looks like one party trying to say, look, we're just going to scrape together together, if we can, a majority just on our own. And it's an interesting dynamic when you think basically a year ago at this time coming out of that election. I remember those Democrats in the states we're talking about, they were scared. They were scared in particular that the first thing Trump was going to go to after taking office was infrastructure.
Yeah.
They thought that was really going to make them choose. Never had to choose on that. Don't have to choose on Texas. They haven't had to choose all year.
We talk about the politics of this a lot. Let's talk about a little bit of what's in the bill and who it benefits. As it stands, the bills that are in the House and the Senate benefit the...
Vote for stagnant wages, fewer jobs, flat wages, and accepting the idea that American jobs will continue to go overseas because of our self-destructive business tax code. So this is for the doers and the dreamers and the hardworking American families who want a piece of the American dream. This is our opportunity. This is our moment to deliver to them an opportunity then to pursue their dreams, and we intend to follow through and accomplish that.
Let's go now to Chairman of the Democratic House Caucus, Congressman Joe Crowley of New York, to respond to Senate Republican leadership right there. You heard Mitch McConnell say, Congressman Crowley, you heard Mitch McConnell say that he never once turned down a meeting with President Obama. Obviously, it's a little different. President Obama wasn't tweeting about Republican leadership and saying that there's no deal to be done. But let's move that to the side. Do you think it's a good idea for the leadership in your party not to show up to this meeting to try and hammer out a deal to keep the government open?
Well, as you said, Katie, the president indicated himself he's not interested in making a deal with Chuck or Nancy. And also at the same time tweeting that maybe we should have a government shutdown. Maybe that'd be a good thing. I don't see how that's a good thing for anyone. I don't think it's good for the American people. It's not good for the process. It's not good for Congress. And that's why I think Nancy and Chuck and Senator Schumer and Leader Pelosi have indicated their willingness to talk to their Republican colleagues and strike a deal and a bargain with them in terms of keeping this government open. I think that's where it's moving now.
Last time they met with the president, they got what they wanted. I mean, he can tweet stuff in the morning. We all know how he works, though. He often agrees with the last person he sees, and he has a rapport in person with Chuck and Nancy, as he likes to call them. Why would they not try to go in and I don't know, convince the president, manipulate the situation, do whatever they do to get him back on their side like he was a couple months ago?
I think the president, quite frankly, felt burned from the last meeting or the meeting they had 3 months ago. I think that's unfortunate. I think it was progress. And what I think it really says, Katie, is you can never take this man at his word. Whether it comes to the Dreamers and his wanting to find a solution for the Dreamers, whether it comes to Chip and wanting to find a solution for that issue, whether it's to really, I think, dig down deep and work in a bipartisan way. The president is rejecting that right now. And I think what Leader Pelosi is suggesting, what Chuck Schumer is suggesting, is that they're going to work with their Republican colleagues in the House and the Senate to try to forge a bipartisan agreement. And then it'll be up to the president to accept or reject that.
Are Democrats willing to shut down the government over DACA?
Democrats are willing to work to secure the future of the 800,000 plus individuals who are dreamers who are in the DACA program. Democrats are working to ensure the extension of the CHIP program that will provide health insurance for children throughout our country, almost 10 million children throughout our country. Democrats are going to work towards keeping government open, and we think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. These are all legitimate and good issues that need to be addressed, and we stand ready to work with our Republican colleagues, and hopefully the president will agree with whatever the Democrats...
Well, that's not quite what I asked. Are you willing to shut down the government over it? I mean, GOP Congressman Curbelo said he's willing to shut down the government over it. This is a Republican.
This is a critical issue for Democrats, and I think for some Republicans as well. We believe we can find common ground here as it pertains to the Dreamers and the DACA recipients. Their lives are incredibly important to the Democratic caucus, and their future is important as well. We pledge to continue to work to keep them here in the United States as productive individuals for our country.
Congressman Joe Crowley of New York, thanks for sticking with us throughout this hour. I know it's been back and forth. Appreciate your time.
Keith and Ben next to me. We were going back and forth. You all were sort of sparring over, you know, why would quoting the president, Chuck and Nancy, the Democratic leaders show up if they were insulted by the president, but at the same time, well, does that still mean they still shouldn't show up? And so hearing to you, sir, when you heard Senator Mitch McConnell saying, well, if Obama did this, I'd still go, you say what?
That's a false hypothetical, because Obama was a president who would never send a tweet insulting his Republican counterparts at any point right before he had a meeting with them. We have a president who's lowered our standards to such a degree that we've accepted it. We've accepted it as normal. And unfortunately, we can't continue to do this if we expect to get anything accomplished. We've gone almost 11 months this year. We haven't gotten health insurance reform they plan. We haven't gotten immigration reform. And we're not about to get this tax reform bill, which they're trying to jam down the government's throats in 1 month, because the president isn't serious about leadership.
You, sir, get the last word. In your red tie.
Yeah, I will say this. I think the point that he was making is very clear. If you're going to be a leader, you got to show up. And if someone says something you don't like, you still show up. Your job is not to be Nancy Pelosi. Your job is to be an elected official for the people that voted you in. And your job is to go and advocate for them, regardless of who the president is, whether you like him or not. This was a stunt by the Democrats today. And it was a stunt that put, I think, themselves before the American people. And that's a sad day for politics.
Ben Ferguson, Keith Boykin, gentlemen, thank you so much. On that, we're going to take you back to our breaking news now. North Korea, after a pretty quiet last couple of months, North Korea has now fired a ballistic missile. The White House says the president was briefed on this while the missile was actually still in the air. Let me add a little bit of information that we have. We are hearing that Japan's chief cabinet secretary, they just held a news conference saying the missile launched from North Korea around 3:18 in the morning their time could possibly land in Japan's exclusive economic zone. And again, the word out of the Pentagon calling it probable missile launch. It had been mighty quiet in North Korea the last couple of months. What do you make of this?
It had. Whenever there's a change in North Korea, you sort of have to ask if there's a political element to the schedule, or is just the result of ongoing developments. It was just their time in a schedule to test a new weapon as they work toward their goal of a ICBM that can deliver a warhead and a reentry vehicle reliably to North America. Politically, this comes on the tails of the U.S. designating North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism, a designation that was dropped in the Bush administration, and other condemnatory actions against North Korea. So there have been some recent political developments. It'll be interesting to see whether that warhead, if it splashed in Japan's exclusive economic zone, whether it was on the east or west side of Japan, which will determine whether it overflew Japan. These early indications, the fact that the president was briefed about the missile launch while the missile launch was still underway reportedly implies that it was perhaps a fairly significant and long-running, not just a short-range ballistic missile, but in fact something that had some distance to it.
Mm-hmm. Sumi, to you, I was talking to some of our correspondents in the region who cover this all the time, and they were making this point about the timing of this. When you look back on the calendar where they were launching, a variety of missiles, mostly after dawn, and this was, in the middle of the night, 3:15 in the morning, it doesn't fit the pattern from what we had seen. What do you think?
Well, that's unusual. They shot this off in the middle of the night. Maybe they were worried about intercept. But look, I don't think this comes as a surprise to a lot of policymakers or Korea watchers. And I don't think North Korea testing this missile test is in response to the United States redesignating North Korea as a state sponsor of terror. No, I don't. North Korea was going to do this anyway. I never bought this argument that North Korea was, they were trying to get back to negotiation, or this lull in testing, and this is 20th missile test this year. I think it was more seasonal reason or their technical reason. Who knows why they were waiting? But I don't think it was because they were trying to get off. So I'm pretty convinced that they're on this path of trying to complete their nuclear and missile program, and that they're not going to get off this path anytime soon. So I also foresee more provocations forthcoming too.
And just staying with you, Sumi, what about the fact, if in fact this lands in the Japan's exclusive economic zone? We know that there had been threats of targeting the U.S. territory of Guam if it took a different trajectory and was around the Japanese waters, and we don't know if it will have overflown Japan. How big a deal is that?
It's a pretty big deal, but not enough also a big deal. I mean, look, North Korea is very deliberate. Kim Jong-un is very deliberate about what they do. So they needed to do something that's a little bit more provocative than normal, but not provocative enough to invite military action. So this is probably very well calculated, if that's the case.
Okay, Sumi and Christian, thank you so much. On that, we'll keep an eye on that story as it continues to develop here. Also learning about the Republican race for votes to pass their tax bill. Moments after the president met with Senate Republicans, we're now hearing the president will be speaking any moment. Stand by for that. Here is Chuck Schumer. Let's actually listen. This is the Democratic leader, minority leader in the Senate.
We need to reach a caps deal to increase defense spending as well as domestic programs that the middle class relies on for jobs. We need to write an omnibus appropriations bill. We need to extend funding for community health centers, reauthorize CHIP, pass disaster aid, and protect dreamers. Now, in order to get all of this done in a few short weeks, all parties need to engage in good faith negotiations to reach an agreement. That's what we hoped would happen at today's White House meeting. Unfortunately, the president had other ideas. With his tweet this morning, President Trump made sure that today's meeting is nothing but a photo op. These issues are far too serious for these kinds of games. Mr. President, it's time to stop tweeting and start leading. There are serious questions that must be answered and many things that must be done. Democrats and Republicans on the Hill have come together on government funding before. In April, Speaker Ryan, Leader McConnell, Leader Pelosi, and I worked together to fund the government and avoid a shutdown. The four of us have worked together before, and we Democrats are ready to do it again. So if President Trump doesn't want to get involved in this, if President Trump says he's not interested in cutting a deal, then we suggest that Speaker Ryan, Leader McConnell, Leader Pelosi, and I sit down. We can come up with a good deal on our own. And that's what was done before. That's what can be done again. As I said, there are serious issues in front of us. We don't have time to waste. We don't have games to play. We need to fund the military. We need to protect millions of American pensions, fund scientific research and student loans. We need to rebuild in Texas, Florida, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and California, and we need to protect the dreamers. If the President reverses course and decides he wants to be a constructive force, working with both sides to forge a bipartisan deal, we're happy to meet with him anytime, anywhere, any place. But as long as he remains a destructive force, it would be a waste of everyone's time to continue working with someone who clearly has no interest in coming to an agreement. We hope the President, in order to avoid this calamity, will change his mind. The President and our Republican friends run the House and Senate. They have a responsibility not to let the government run out of funds. We're willing to work with them, but they have to do it in a bipartisan way. Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Chuck. The tweet that the President released this morning concerned me in one particular respect. There is only one immigration bill that is pending before this Congress that is being taken seriously. Senator Cornyn, the Republican whip, just addressed it. It's one that we all know very well. It's the President's decision on September the 5th to eliminate DACA protection. 780,000 young people who came forward, paid the filing fee, went through a criminal background check, submitted all their information to our government, are currently protected from deportation and given a right to work. President Trump announced on September 5th that as of March 5th next year, that protection would end. And with the end of that protection, it means disastrous consequences for thousands and thousands of these young people. He called on Congress to act, and as Senator Cornyn said, it's our responsibility to act. How did the President describe this challenge this morning in his tweet? He said the Democrats were coming in favor of illegal immigrants flooding into our country unchecked. Illegal immigrants flooding into our country unchecked. The DREAM Act requires that if you're eligible, you have to have been in the United States for 4 years. We're not talking about people flooding into the United States. We're talking about those who've lived their lives in the United States being given a chance to earn their way to legal status and citizenship. That's what the challenge is before us. We need a president who will work with us to solve the problem which he created on September 5th when he abolished DACA. We need a president who has said so many times that he's respectful of the talents these young people bring to America. We need a president who doesn't use this divisive rhetoric. We can sit down and do this on a bipartisan basis. I'm convinced of it. Senator Graham is co-sponsoring the DREAM Act with me. There are 3 other Republican sponsors. It can be done. But we have to stop the divisive rhetoric, stop the tweeting, and instead sit down and meet our responsibility before the end of this year. It can be done, not with these tweets.
We heard from Republicans. Now you're getting response from Democrats. You heard one of the overarching themes there from the Dems up on Capitol Hill. Stop the tweeting. Stop the tweeting, Mr. President. You heard from a man who was supposed to be meeting with the president, the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. He and the House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi should be en route to the White House right now. They're not because of a tweet from the president this morning essentially saying, that they're not open to a deal. And when we listen to Senator Schumer, he's essentially saying he's willing to work with Republicans, but he wants to work with Republicans who are willing to work with them, the Democrats. Jeff Zeleny is standing by. He's our senior White House correspondent. And Jeff Zeleny, as we listen to Senator Schumer and talk about how the president right now is just being destructive, you now have news. We're about to hear from the president himself.
We are indeed, Brooke. Around 3 o'clock or so, perhaps a little bit after that, the president will be speaking from the Roosevelt Room of the White House. Now, we do not know the exact topic of this, but it is likely it will be some type of a statement about the missile launch that happened earlier in North Korea. We heard the president there at the very end of his meeting on Capitol